hikers, campers, and rangers have been seeing and encountering things coming out of and pulling things into the earth. So if you don't want your sanctuary that is your tent absolutely just ruined, I would go find a different video. And a warning, this does get rather graphic, so if that is not something you want to be a part of, absolutely okay. I would point you to a different video. Let's get right into it. I'm gonna start by explaining how I stumbled upon this barely talked about or unknown phenomena, entity, whatever you want to call it. Then we're going to dive into the encounters. And I'm going to start with the most tame, and then we're going to get worse as we go, and then end with the worst one. Then we're going to dive into kind of what I think might be going on, or what these things are, what they want, what they could possibly be, and just kind of pick it apart for a second. And then if you stick around to the end, there are some ways to protect yourselves that I was personally told about, and I'm going to share those with you if you want some peace of mind for the next time you go camping. But let's start. I'm falling off my seat. Oh my God. There we go. I'm sitting on a pillow. How did I learn about this? So I love camping, and I met one of my friends who is a tried and true Youper in the UP to go do some camping. And the night before we set out to go camping, we went to this bar called the Dock. It was, I think it was a Friday night. It was busy. There was a lot of people there. And while we were sitting at the bar just talking, this old couple next to me overheard that we were going to go camping the next day and basically said, "Oh, you're going camping? Make sure you're careful. The root children have been really active." Like zoinks. Ma'am, okay, what are you talking about? I thought they were pulling my chain, and they had no clue who I was or what I do. And they just kept talking about it. And I started realizing, oh, they're serious. And then the bartender had an encounter to tell us about. And then some of the people in our general vicinity just started talking about it. And one of the people told us about this weird thing that happened at a place called Dead River Falls. So this area known as Dead River Falls, you follow a river, and as you keep following it, you keep encountering these waterfalls. And there are also some hidden natural grottos within the space as well. And he said that the campers had set up not too far from one of these natural swimming areas. And it was a windy night. So they dug, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they dug into the ground and they made a fire. It was getting late and they were all about to turn in, and from the darkness, they heard this cracking, and the crack just turned into what sounded like a huge tree falling. So that happened, and they all basically went from looking at the fire to looking at the perimeter of where they were at. And the vibe of the woods just changed. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but if there's a predator or you get something, I don't know how to explain it if you haven't experienced it, but something happens when it just changes. I don't know how to explain it. So that situation happens. They're all staring out into the woods, and it was kind of like the forest took a breath after that. Everything settled back down, and their nerves they relaxed a little bit more. So they start turning around back to the fire, and that's when they notice that the fire that they had dug into the ground in the areas surrounding it looked like someone had taken a mixer and just swirled the ground up. It was basically erased. In my brain, I'm like, okay, there has to be maybe a rational explanation for this. And I start thinking that, first of all, the trees, it's their people's favorite pastime. They love falling. I think a tree just fell in the woods. Then we get to the swirly, fun disappearing campfire. I don't know how, unless it was a localized earthquake that they somehow didn't feel, or I don't know. I start thinking about what could possibly manipulate that earth like that quickly, and I don't know. That I can't explain that one. Upside, no one got hurt in this one. But that ends with our next story. So the bartender told us this encounter that happened at a lumber yard. So apparently there was this trucker who works in lumber yards. There was a trucker who works in lumber yards. Yikes. So works in lumber yards transporting cut down trees, and he was picking up a new shipment at the lumber yard. And so it was late at night and he was picking this up, and before he was leaving, he was doing like a perimeter check of the vehicle. And as he was doing that, he said that it felt like some sort of hand came up from the ground and pulled him down up to about mid-thigh. And his leg just wasn't stuck in the ground. Apparently, he had a compound fracture to his femur. His ankle was crushed and his tibia and fibia were also broken. Overall, not having a good day at work, I would say personally. And on top of that, apparently he had weird bruise in it that looked like a large deformed hand. This story, I do have a hard time believing. To me, this smells kind of like a possible workplace accident. Someone's embarrassed and trying to cover it up. It was night. There's heavy machinery, which could possibly make leg-sized holes in the ground. Bruises can make all sorts of, weird and interesting patterns. But there is part of me that's like, okay, he's been doing this for his entire life. He's probably really familiar with spaces like that. So part of me is like, maybe. The next one is a little harder to explain. So there was this college-age guy who came over and told us the story about some hunters involving the Root Children. And he said that there was a hunter and his son sitting up in a deer blind, and it was early in the morning. And the father kept saying something doesn't feel right. It feels off, which reminds me of the very first encounter. So remember that for later. And so they're sitting there, and just to visually, so you understand what they're like, where they're sitting, they're up in a tree and they're looking at this small clearing in the middle of the forest. And out of nowhere from behind them come running several buck. These buck come barreling out of nowhere from behind them, and they go directly underneath them, and they're heading for this clearing that has like tall grass. So he tries to get a shot off, and he doesn't think he hits them, and two of the buck go directly through the middle of the clearing and into this tall grass and just disappear. They're obviously completely confused. He didn't think he got a shot. The other deer just kind of run away, and so they decide, let's go check out what's going on. So they come down the blind and approach where the deer fell. But when they got to where they thought they were, all they found were two deer-sized patches of turned up earth. The whole thing, it's just weird. First, you don't often see buck just hanging out together. It's a weird thing. And from my experience, deer run like that when they're being chased by a predator or something larger than them. And what would be strong enough to pull a deer into the ground? And not just one, but two. Part of me is like, well, possibly the holes were already there, maybe, but that would be a huge coincidence for something like that to happen. And I can't really think of a known land animal with the force and ability to pull a buck into the ground. Maybe a gorilla if it decided to hide in the ground, maybe, but I'm at least 42% sure gorillas do not live in the UP. I don't know. But now we get to the final one. If you don't have a solid stomach, you've been warned. And the following is the way that it was told to me. So an avid and experienced camper, who we're going to call Jane Doe, had taken many solo trips ranging from a couple days to a couple months. And she was preparing to go on a brand new trip. This trip was really no different than the rest, but it was someplace that she had never been before. It was planned to be a 3-week trip, but the 3 weeks turned into 2 months. Then a missing persons report was filed and a search and rescue team was sent. It was a month before they found a small single-person tent in the forest and far off the trail. When they approached the site, there was no sign of a struggle, no rips, tears, or any clues that might point to forced entry or some type of attack. And the rainfly and tent door were still zipped shut. The one out-of-place thing that was noted in the report was the discovery of what appeared to be someone digging a hole at the base of the tree only yards away from the tent. An obvious sign that someone was chopping into this tree. But as they approached the tent, the sound of buzzing grew louder. The tent was unzipped, and that is when they discovered a gruesome sight. The floor of the tent was covered in dirt. The tarp under the tent and the tent floor itself appeared to have been ripped through. In the middle of the tent was a person-sized sinkhole, and protruding from it was half of a sleeping bag and the lower half of our missing Jane Doe. The search and rescue team attempted to search the surrounding area for the rest of her, but could not locate anything else. The autopsy report stated that she was not separated using any kind of tools, but rather pulled apart with brute force. At the site, no human DNA was discovered, and the case is still unsolved to this day. Now, my only kind of explanation for this would be a bear attack, but that doesn't really work because it was reported that the tent was untouched with no signs of forced entry. And bears aren't really delicate, you know? Then I move on to, well, okay, it's a person then. They came at night while she was sleeping, and it would explain the tent still being zipped closed. And it had been a long period of time, so DNA could possibly not have been able to be found, but I don't know. I'm not a DNA science doctor person. Also, no tools being used, just brute force. Don't think a human could do that. So then what is going on? What are root children? Why has no one ever heard of them? Why is it the first time I'm hearing of it? And if you've heard of it, you tell me, put it somewhere, tell me, I want to know. But let's pick this apart and try and see what we can come up with. And how do you protect yourself? I like camping. I don't want to get ripped apart. So let's get into it. So looking at all these encounters, I am seeing some similarities popping up. In the first encounter, the campers dug a hole and lit a fire. They disturbed the earth, the land. And in the logging trucker one, if it wasn't actually a workplace accident, I would say that the area where he was also a place where the land was being disturbed. Trees are being taken down, and I'm going to assume there is digging happening. But I also kind of think that he played the I fell in the hole, hurt myself, and blamed the ghost card. So there's that. Then we have the hunters. Now, they didn't hurt anything. They didn't dig. They didn't do anything to the land. They just witnessed stuff. And what they saw kind of sounds like something was hunting prey to me. And then we get to our tent encounter. I can only assume Jane Doe was, for some unknown reason, digging and chopping up this tree. Again, disturbing the land in some type of way, which falls perfectly in with everything else. And is the only time really when something happens. Also, I was like, okay, what do these root children look like? And they all actually kind of had the same description. All the people at the bar were telling me this. The bigger they are, the older they are. They are held together by what looks like roots surrounding this kind of dirt ball mass that can have any number of appendages. No one ever described any kind of face, and seeing one above ground is extremely rare and considered a bad omen, which is probably why there isn't much info on them. And believe me, I tried looking. I tried every combo in every search engine of words to find something. Try it. You can't find anything. Also, if you're going like, cool, so I'm just never gonna go camping ever again, don't worry. There are some weird methods to avoid encounters, protect yourself, or understand the signs and clues that will warn you of their presence. Everyone I talked to had their own unique way of kind of going about it. And everything that you were seeing and hearing is made by yours truly. Like literally all of this, it's just me, hi. And it takes longer than I would like to admit to make. If you want to help me make some chaos that also kind of helps me out, it is neutral chaos. Spell the sound in the comments. I love the idea that someone's not going to get this far and maybe look at the comment, or the first comment will be just something weird like that, and they're going to be so confused, and it just, I don't know, I just like that. Or hit some of the buttons, subscribe if you want to see more, so I can hopefully do this full time one day. Anyway, thank you so much, and let's get on to the protection. Okay, so this first one comes from Jaydre. That's the old lady who was at the bar who started me down this whole path. It's a bit of kind of a twofold thing. First, she said, state your intention to the surrounding trees. Literally say out loud or in your head your intentions for the space. She made it clear that these are emotional entities, creatures, whatever you want to call them, and that the root systems carry messages. Making your presence known so you don't scare them and letting them know why you're there really helps. She then said to find an acorn or some local tree seed and plant it in or near where you're camping. it's kind of a peaceful gesture. But then this brings up the question, okay, well, how do I know that they're there? The following: large spots of turned up earth, areas with really old trees like old growth forests, areas near water, and small animals like cats and dogs disappearing. On to the next way to protect yourself from the root children. Whenever you can, try and get off the forest floor. So like hammock camping. I love hammock camping, it's my favorite. But since the root children do not like to come out of the ground, you're pretty much safe from that. And also, but I do like being in a tent. It's so comforting, and just hearing the sounds of rain on it, oh, it's amazing. But also the idea of something coming up through the ground, pulling me into the earth's core, never to be seen again, a little scary, but things happen. Our next way to protect ourselves from the root children, and that is carrying a piece of silver on you while you camp. Apparently, they don't like it. It kind of ended there. They just kind of said, yeah, carry some silver. And I was like, period, end. That was it. Also, it just sounds like root children don't actively seek out people. If you're camping in an area that is frequented by people, you're probably good. But apparently they are quite active in the spring and the fall. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps. Bye-bye.